Larry Ellison. Maybe you've never heard this name before, but you should know it, because what Larry Ellison achieved on the 11th of September of 2025 shatters everything you think you know about wealth. On that single day, he earned $100 billion. That made his total fortune surpass even that of Elon Musk, so that Larry Ellison is now the richest man in the world. But who exactly is this Larry Ellison? And above all, how did he become so unbelievably rich? In this video, we'll show you the incredible life of Larry Ellison and also reveal the secret behind his wealth. You'll also find out why it borders on a miracle that Larry Ellison became such a successful man. Because at the beginning of his life, it didn't look like he would ever become anything special. And you'll also learn why Larry Ellison, at the proud age of 81, still looks so young, and why it's possible that he may live for several more decades. To understand who Larry Ellison really is, we first need to take a look at his childhood. Larry Ellison was born in 1944 in New York City, back then still as Larry Spellman. But right from the very beginning, his life was anything but easy. His biological mother was a young, single Jewish woman, and his father was fighting in the war at the time. When Larry was 9 months old, he came down with a severe case of pneumonia. Since his mother was already completely overwhelmed with the little baby, she gave Larry up for adoption. So Larry ended up as a small baby with his Aunt Lillian and his uncle Louis Ellison in Chicago, where he took on the last name Ellison. However, life with his adoptive parents was not easy. His adoptive father in particular was strict, often distant, and placed a lot of importance on Jewish traditions. On top of that, his family had barely any money, since Larry's adoptive father had lost his entire fortune in the Great Depression. So Larry grew up in Chicago in the 1940s and 1950s and attended the South Shore High School there. By the way, the same school that James Watson, the discoverer of DNA, attended. However, Larry was not a top student in school, but even back then he had a huge interest in science and technology. He even tinkered with small electronics projects and read many books about physics. After school, Larry was convinced that he knew his life's dream. He wanted to work as a doctor with his own practice in Los Angeles and start a family there. Especially since his entire family, and also his girlfriend, advised him to study medicine. After all, being a doctor was a noble profession, well paid, and certainly could also be enjoyable. So Larry followed his dream and began studying medicine at the University of Illinois, but this phase turned out to be one of the hardest times in his life, because Larry struggled through all the lectures and had no deeper interest in medicine. After 2 years of torment, Larry realized that becoming a doctor was not his own dream, but rather that of his parents and his girlfriend. So he decided to take a radical step. He had heard about the hippie movement in California, and at the age of 21, moved to Berkeley. There began an adventurous time for Larry. He got married and started working as a programmer. However, at the same time, he also discovered the wild nature of California, especially Yosemite National Park and the Sierra Nevada, so he started working there as a rafting guide and climbing instructor. That way, he worked part-time as a programmer to earn enough money and spent the rest of his time doing adventure activities in nature. According to his own statements, Larry was very satisfied with his life back then, but there was one problem. His wife felt that Larry wasn't making enough of himself and didn't show enough ambition. When Larry one day suggested buying a sailboat, she had enough and divorced him. At the same time, there was a new development that was about to influence Larry's life. In the south of San Francisco, more and more interesting computer companies were setting up shop. It was the birth of Silicon Valley. So Larry changed his job and in the following years began working at several interesting startups. He started at the company Amdahl and soon worked on various technology projects, including new databases that he was supposed to develop for the CIA. And then is when the turning point appeared. Through his interest in databases, he realized that databases could revolutionize the way companies store and retrieve information. In 1977, together with 2 colleagues, he therefore founded the company's Software Development Laboratories. His core idea was to develop a database software that could store information efficiently, retrieve it quickly, and allow complex queries. That was a real revolution at the time, and Larry was convinced that companies using this technology would gain an enormous competitive advantage. He called the software Oracle, and his theory proved correct. Oracle was a huge success on the market, so Ellison even renamed his company after it. Over the next 20 years, Oracle steadily expanded its product portfolio and became one of the most important providers of database software. In nearly 2000, however, a new phase began for Oracle. Because with the internet boom, many new tech companies suddenly entered the market that Ellison had to change his main focus. From then on, he concentrated on acquiring promising software companies and integrating their products into his existing company. Over the years, he bought dozens of companies in the business software sector, often for several $1 billion per deal. It was risky, but it paid off because today, Oracle is worth over $900 billion and is one of the 20 largest companies in the world. But now the question arises, why is Larry Ellison's fortune growing so much right now? And how could he gain $100 billion in wealth in just a single day? The reason lies mainly in a trend that Ellison recognized early on: the cloud. More and more companies are moving their data and software into the cloud because it is more flexible, faster, and more cost-efficient. In recent years, Oracle has invested massively in its cloud services, modernized existing software solutions, and at the same time acquired new companies with specialized solutions. This created an ecosystem in which almost every major company uses Oracle software at some point, whether for databases, finance, human resources, or customer management. So that explains why Oracle is so valuable, but how exactly could Ellison earn $100 billion in a single day? That's because on the 10th of September, Oracle's new quarterly figures were released. It also became known that Oracle had signed numerous new contracts with big corporations. All of these numbers were much better than analysts had predicted, so Oracle's stock price jumped overnight by more than 35%. Since Larry Ellison still owns an incredible 42% of Oracle, much more than other tech billionaires still own of their companies, his fortune shot up by over $100 billion. With an estimated wealth of $393 billion that actually makes him richer than Elon Musk, whose Tesla shares have dropped by almost 20% so far this year. Finally, one last question remains. According to Larry Ellison, who is already 81 years old, what should happen to his money after his death? The answer is, he does not plan on dying. Because Larry Ellison is obsessed with the idea of radically extending his life, maybe even living forever. Since the 1990s, he has invested billions into research on aging processes. With his Ellison Medical Institute, he has supported projects in biogerontology for decades. He himself often says that death is a disease, and diseases can be cured. In everyday life, Ellison pays meticulous attention to his body. He is said to maintain strict routines, from an almost flawless diet to high-quality supplements designed to strengthen his immune system and slow down cellular aging. Friends report that he regularly undergoes medical checkups, keeps up with the latest developments in genetic research, and leaves almost nothing untried that could extend his lifespan. His dream is to turn back the human biological clock. And when people ask him how old he wants to become, he usually doesn't give a concrete answer. Let us know in the comments what you think of Larry Ellison. Thanks for watching. See you next time.